Meet PitchDB, the ultimate platform for speakers looking to make their mark on podcasts, conferences, and media outlets. PitchDB provides access to over 3 million platforms, ensuring you find the perfect avenue for your message. With AI integrations, your bios and pitches are tailored uniquely to each opportunity, giving you the edge you need. Join now at pitchdb.com.
Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I have Kevin Anderson of Kevin Anderson Associates on the show today, hailing from the opposite coast, but originally from Canada. Kevin, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I would love for you to tell us what your journey was like. We were talking before we started the recording that you're from a small town in northern Alberta, Canada. I said, oh, is it Edmonton? Which isn't really a small town, but that's the furthest north I know. And you're like, no, an even smaller town. So the journey that propelled you from there to Harvard?
Yeah. It was an unexpected journey, and it wasn't even a town. I mean, we grew up half an hour outside of the small town. The closest neighbor was about 3-4 miles away. And so, just a really remote area and a small farm, and, a lot of outdoor activities because there wasn't a whole lot else to do. But, it was a great place to grow up. And, the path to Harvard was basically through education. I went to a small undergraduate school in Canada called University of Lethbridge, which is in southern Alberta. And, at that time, my passion, I decided anyway at the time, was really for teaching. I really wanted to be a teacher. Originally, I wanted to be a high school teacher.
Oh.
And I did an undergrad in history and philosophy, and it was also part of a teacher's college program. And then I just really loved school. I really enjoyed the higher learning. And so I thought, let's still be a teacher, but let's be a professor. That way I can keep learning and keep doing, stay in school for graduate program. And because I really, really enjoyed, especially philosophy and lit theory, I was really connecting with that. So that's what led me to apply to Harvard. And it was the only place I applied. I was either going to go and explore Europe, backpack in Europe, or go to Harvard. And then I got in. So, it was a big surprise to me. And that obviously, really changed the course of my life. Moved from, across the country to Boston and to Cambridge. And but that's what led me there to do my graduate work there with intention of getting my PhD and, becoming a professor.
So you said you're not a professor, you were a teacher. I beg to differ, even part-time and adjunct, I'm a part-time professor. So I still consider you a professor, even though you don't necessarily use that language. But what took you out of that world of, I'm going to pursue being a professor, I'm going to keep, obviously, I think you are still a lifelong learner and probably use that in your everyday. But what was the change that created where you are now?
Yeah, throughout my life, I always loved to just jump on everything. Any kind of opportunity, new thing, new place. I had a lot of weird and different jobs, everything from tree planting with helicopter, out of a helicopter. They would drop you off on a helicopter in a cut block and you tree plant. It's one of those facts that I often put in those games. I planted 500,000 trees. Not too many people can say that. But then I was a lifeguard. I would always jump on opportunities. I'd love to just explore everything, and travel and everything was always really exciting to me. When I was at graduate school, just looking to make money, was a tutor, and I was getting a lot of opportunities. People were, when they found out that I was tutoring, they just, one thing led to another. I was getting people just asking me to, tutor their kids, and then another mother would ask me to tutor their kid. And I was working at a Korean private school for boys in Brookline, which is a suburb of Boston. And, I really loved teaching, and the opportunity started to become more than I could handle. So it just made sense to me to jump on the opportunity to hire other people to get them work and just take a cut. It just seemed like it was never a business plan or anything like that. It just seemed like it just made sense, right? I mean, I got too much work. Why not spread it around? There's other people that are perfectly capable of doing what I'm doing and have the same credentials. So I started to just hire my friends and colleagues to do the work, the overflow. And, it really took off. And, at first it was just tutoring, but then one day someone reached out from across the coast. I think they were from Seattle. And they said, look, I really need your help. I've written this paper. I just want you to look at it and give me feedback. Tell me what's working, what's not, like why, just give me some kind of advice and feedback based on your expertise. And kind of a light bulb went off at that point. And, PayPal was in its beginning stages where you could just take credit cards from across, from anywhere. And, the light bulb went off that we could do work from across the country. We could do remote, tutoring and editing. And so it wasn't long, the logistics side of running a tutoring company were intense. So there's lots of things like I didn't like sending tutors to, just the liability side, sending tutors into people's homes, and you never know if the parents are going to be there or not. And it just seemed like such a easier way forward. It just made a lot more sense to do it remote. So yeah, we kind of transformed the business to just being editorial, just kind of looking over people's work, doing, virtual tutoring. And yeah, we kind of went in that direction. And pretty soon the company took off to a point where I really had to make a decision whether I wanted to kind of go with the company and be fully involved in that or continue with my graduate studies. And yeah, I chose the company. Again, at that time, it was nothing to do with books, but eventually kind of led in that direction. And that's where I am today.
Wow. And how many books have you worked on, or your
our company
agency worked on at this point?
Yeah, we do about 500 to 600 a year now that we were working on one way or another. That's a mix of ghostwriting books from scratch, as well as rewriting books or book coaching, as well as book editing. So it's a wide range of services that we do, all related to books, making them better, and then helping figure out the publishing path and strategy as well. But yeah, we're nearing 6,000 books that we worked on over the last 10 years or so.
That's truly amazing in a world where we see people making claims that they can write a book on AI and publish it so quickly. And of course, we know that that's not really a great piece of content or literature, but
you can do it. It's not good, but you can do it.
And you have now grown. So you have offices in different cities across the country.
Yeah, and in other countries. So yeah, we have our main headquarters is in New York. That's like the publishing hub. That's where all the big publishers have their main offices, and a lot of agencies are there. So it made sense for us to set up our first office there. Then we set up an office next in Nashville. A lot of people don't realize, but Nashville actually has, Harper and Hachette both have big publishing outposts there. Yeah, it's a place, and it's a happening place. It's got a lot of talent that goes through there. So it's been a good move to open up a shop there. And then we opened up in LA shortly thereafter. The most recent place that we opened an office, though, which is really exciting, is London. And so we've got a whole team over there in the UK that's doing everything that we do here in the States, but we also cross-collaborate a lot. So a lot of books, as you can imagine, that are popular here are popular there, and vice versa. So that's been the most recent endeavor, which has been really fun.
Yeah. Well, and how did you go from providing services, looking through papers, to all of a sudden somebody then said, hey, can you help us with a book? And then now it's huge growth.
Yeah. So, just like sheer numbers wise, when we were started out in tutoring, within a year, I think it was within a year for sure, we were hitting six figures, gross revenue, which, at the time, was just, I couldn't even believe it. I never even imagined that I have a company that would net six figures. And so we grew kind of slowly, but it felt quick to me. But then a hybrid publisher, I wouldn't even say it's a hybrid. I would say it's more what you call vanity press, which is basically a publisher that it's a way for authors to self-publish, but it looks like they're traditionally published. And they call it a vanity press because a lot of times it's just for, to look good. And so they reached out looking for help because they were having a struggle finding copy editors, which is a very common thing. It's really hard to find good copy editors. So they reached out because we were all Harvard PhDs or people in the PhD program, and they were impressed by that. And they were having such trouble. They thought, who else better than, an English professor to kind of edit our books? And, again, it was another light bulb where, it was just so much better to work on books than to do tutoring. Tutoring was such small, projects, and a book, they were big. The authors weren't starving students that could barely afford it. There were people usually that had the resources to afford services. With that publisher, it was recurring revenue too, because they kept coming back with new, but we never edited a book before though. When they approached us to say, who got a book? We had never edited a book before, but we just, we said, yes, of course, we can do that. It's language is language. We figured, we've read a lot of books, and, of course we can critique and copy edit a book. And so, we just always said yes to opportunities, and just, we always made sure that we could back it up. I made sure I found people that could do a great job with it. They liked the service, and so then we were doing books too. So we're doing like resumes, books, tutoring. It was like a lot of different communication services. Then, of course, one day they sent us a book that was just in shambles and we couldn't even edit it. And they said, sorry, we can't even edit this. It needs to be rewritten. And they said, well, can you rewrite it? I said, sure. Yeah, we can rewrite it. We'd never rewritten a book before, but we knew we had the skill set to do it. And I found somebody, a contract worker that had experience with books. And with this type of book, it was a specific genre. It wasn't too complicated. It was like a pretty basic memoir, but yeah, they went in and they rewrote the book. And again, usually we were charging like $2,000 or something to edit a book. And then that we charged like $6,000, which was like the most we'd ever charged anybody for anything at that point. for reference, I mean, now we're charging in the hundreds of thousands to write books, so it's just the scale has changed quite a bit. But at the time, it was a big, big win for us. And again, a light bulb went off and just said, hey, this is something that, this makes sense. We can do this. There's a market for it. Let's do this more often. So we started to rebrand and market ourselves more as, having like a book wing that just did books, rewriting, of course, rewriting. As you can imagine, the next thing was ghostwriting. Someone came and they said, hey, I just have a book idea. I'm a terrible writer. Can you just write this book for me? Right. And again, we just jumped on the opportunity and said, sure, we can do it. And as long as we stood behind, we always stood behind our work. We always made sure it was well done. We always made sure that the client was happy, but we just never said no. We always just grabbed the opportunities as they came. And, now it's an 8-figure annual revenue business that's, we've got 30 in-house editors and literally hundreds of contractors, and a lot of them are working basically full-time for us. But it was just all baby steps. It was never a plan. It was always just an opportunity came up and we said, yeah, that's a good idea. And then we would change everything. We would change the website, we change our advertising, we change everything to include this new service. And when it became obvious that that was really the better and more lucrative, once the books really took over, we split the company altogether and I separated the academic company completely. It's now called the Dissertation Editor. It's a part of it's called the PhD Advantage, which is the parent company. And there's a CEO that runs it. But then I went with the book company because it was a lot more fun to edit books than dissertations. So yeah, I went with the book company, which was, which we named Kevin Anderson and Associates, which is, we just KAA. And we just focus only on anything related to books. On the editorial side, we don't do any publishing in-house or anything like that, but just anything editorial or helping authors figure out how to really explode their book and launch it and support their business or whatever their publishing goal is. That's what we're here to do.
Have you ever had to turn down an author? Somebody you just said, it doesn't fit the kind of people we like or our values or, yeah.
Yes. And we do that more now than before. There's obvious stuff racist, sexist, whatever. I mean, we will always say no to those kinds of projects. There are some clients that just, it might be kind of on the line where it's a little controversial. We're not really sure. They're kind of trying to stoke something, but we're not really sure what side they're going on. And we're not trying to be moral police or anything, but we just don't want to, at the same time, we don't want to be involved in something that we really feel is unethical. So we stay out of those projects. The other times that we have to say no is, if we had a nickel for every time an author said, once you hear my story, you'll want to pay me to write the book.
No.
And, let's go 50-50. And, let's just be partners in this. And a lot of people think they have a book in them and that it's going to be just, that everyone's going to be lining up, But so we get a lot of those that we turn down. If someone has the resources and it's a good book and it's not an ethically questionable book, for the most part, we will work with them. One thing that we have to often mitigate, though, is their expectations on what publishing can offer. So, for instance, a lot of authors, they're looking to boost their business. They're looking to boost their platform. They're wanting to elevate their authority in their space, which a book does a really great job of doing, right? It's a reason for media. A lot of media likes to pitch authors. You'll often see when you're looking at CNN or Bloomberg, and they have a talking head that's a guest, you'll often see at the end, they happen to have a book just on this topic that just came out. And there's a reason for that. They're always looking for experts. And one of the things, how they identify an expert is that they have a book out relatively recently on the topic. So a lot of business authors that come to us are thought leaders or just people looking to elevate their authority in the space. When they're coming to us, they have a specific goal, right? To get a book published in a way that they can then market themselves and get media. And for that author, there's tons and tons of opportunity. For that author, it's basically a guarantee that, we can write the book, find a publisher. It might not be a HarperCollins, $500,000 deal, but there will be a publisher, some kind of publisher out there that can do what's needed to get the book out there and then get them the media and exposure that they want. Whereas if it's a fiction writer writing a novel or even maybe a memoir from a person who's, everyone's story is really unique and special, but that doesn't mean that people are going to line up to buy it, right?
Right.
And a lot of people, they're really passionate about telling their story or this idea. And, we can get those books written and published, but what we can't promise on those books is a bestseller or a lot of sales. It's really, unless they're willing to invest a lot into marketing and promotion, it's really hard to have a fiction book make it it's less certain than like a professional's book where you can really connect the dots, find the audience, find the platforms, find the podcasts. Like there's just a way forward to make that all work. So we promise different things to different clients depending on what their goals are, what kind of book they're writing.
Yeah. Well, and I would love for you to talk about that a little bit, because you hear that there are different ways to become a bestseller, right? There's a lot of people who do the Amazon bestseller. I've been in an anthology that was an Amazon bestseller, and there's the whole thing what you do with the algorithms or making the price 99 cents or whatever on the Kindle version. So there are those techniques, but then you're also talking about HarperCollins and bigger publishers that we all are aware of, and also New York Times bestseller list, Wall Street Journal. These other things that we see as very high profile and maybe less attainable in some ways. So we talk about the role of navigating publishers. And because I'm flagging here, you said you work on the book, you're not a publishing house, you're not going to publish it. And I know that a lot of people who are in the self-publishing world, they are offering the whole service, right? So that's one thing that really differentiates you. But you also have all of these connections with the marquee publishing houses.
Yeah, so let me answer that, and then I'll talk about like the bestseller list, which is an interesting topic. So for us, we're publisher agnostic. So people come to us because they want to know what the best way forward for them is in both building a book that achieves their publishing goals and then helping them connect to the right people to achieve those publishing goals. So if they want to go the HarperCollins route, they want a big 5 publisher with an advanced paying deal, we're someone that can make that happen. We'll write the book that focuses on that. We'll give them the strategy to achieve that. And we also, we've landed deals with Harper directly. So we can land deals directly with big 5 publishers as well as smaller independent publishers. Or we can help them find an agent. We often do this. We connect with CAA or WME or UTA or our other agencies to get them an agent that will then land the deal with a big traditional publisher. However, some of our authors don't have like the platform or the book idea to necessarily go that route. And we explain that to them early in the process, what's realistic for them to achieve. But there's lots of other options with hybrid and self-publishing that we then also help them figure out. And we navigate to ensure that they're with the best possible hybrid to meet their goals. Hybrid is kind of a form of self-publishing, but they do a lot for you, much more than like what a typical self-publishing process would do. So, but depending on their budget and their goals and their timeline, we just make sure that they're with the very best people, just because there are a lot of shady actors out there that are providing less than, they're either overcharging or they're just not coming through at all with what they promise. So we help navigate that whole process. But we don't publish in-house. We're always giving it to the best. There's just too many great publishers and too many options out there for us to be everything to everyone when it comes to the publisher. Like we really want to make sure we're getting them the best possible home. So that's how we operate in terms of landing deals. Now, in terms of the bestseller list, there are a lot of different things to talk about with the bestseller list, but essentially Amazon bestsellers, those are based on number of sales within a specific amount of time, and it's a very short amount of time. So essentially, if you can get all your friends and family to buy the book at the same time, it's relatively easy, and a lot of people do it. Hit an Amazon bestseller, and even hitting number 1 in a subcategory, you might be a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory. You're number 1 in this very, very niche book, but still, it's really nice to be able to say, number 1 bestseller, number 1 Amazon bestseller. But it is definitely easier to manipulate and make that happen. It's also something you can do whether you're self-published or a traditionally published author. You don't have to have any sales through bookstores or anything like that to hit an Amazon bestseller list. It's just based on how many people are buying the book through Amazon. It's much different with USA Today. Wall Street Journal bestseller list is actually on hiatus right now. But with USA Today bestseller list and Wall Street Journal, those are based on book sales, but they're based on total book sales, not just Amazon, also Barnes and Nobles and other independent bookstores, et cetera. So with those lists, and the numbers they're based on a weekly basis. So you're also, it's not just a short amount of time like Amazon, which could be just a couple, like 12-hour span. Now you're looking at a week, and usually it's a minimum of depends on the week, depends on the time of year, but usually it's like 5,000 to 7,000 copies. You're going to be like breaking into the bottom of the list on those 2 lists. However, self-publishing authors is really difficult to get on any of those lists because they're looking at retail sales, and often those 99-cent campaigns are not working for hitting those lists. They're looking for higher priced books. They're looking for sales that are actually running through retail channels, that are running through bookstores, that are running through more points of sale than just Amazon alone. Although if you sell enough copies at full price or close to, you can even discount them. You can still target the USA Today list. It's just not as easy, not even close to as easy as an Amazon list. New York Times is a whole nother thing. New York Times list is not, so USA Today and Wall Street Journal are based on sales. So if you look at the sales, show you the data. And if you look at the sales, you can see which ones have sold more. And it's like, it's in order. New York Times, you might have a book that outsells everything on the list and doesn't even show up on the list.
Really?
Number one, it's an editorial list. So there's a group that picks and chooses what's going to be on the list. So in the end, if they don't want the book on the list, it's not going on the list. Mm-hmm. And Mark Manson's Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, that's been on the list forever. They love that book. Even when it's outsold by like 5 other books, they usually still include it because they love it. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. And so the New York Times, what they look at is they look at the sales distribution over the whole country. If you only sell in Wisconsin and nowhere else, you're not going to hit the New York Times list. They look at sales over time. A lot of people love to load up their pre-orders because all your pre-orders count towards your first week of publication. But even during that first week of publication, New York Times is going to look at like, are the sales just like dropping off dramatically? Did you sell everything on the first couple of days and then everything falls off? And for their monthly lists, they really look closely at that. Is everything sold in the first week and then it just completely falls off sales-wise? If so, then you'll miss the list. If all your sales are from Amazon, you'll miss the list. If all your sales are from one independent bookstore or Barnes & Nobles and nowhere else, then they're going to be looking at that with skepticism. And of course, if they also keep an eye out for like bulk buys and stuff like that, they're going to be very wary of anything that appears to be sold in bulk where someone's trying to rig the system. And again, in the end, though, as well, it's whether they want it on the list or not. Now, self-published authors, it's almost impossible to hit the New York Times bestseller list because they're looking at sales through retail channels. It's not impossible. It does happen, but you have to, if you're a self-published author, you're going to have convinced enough bookstores to carry your book and report those sales to be able to hit that list, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. It can happen, but it's really, really, really challenging. So anyway, that I'm not sure if that adds more confusion.
Yeah, no, that actually adds a lot of great context because I think these are things that are really mysterious to people who are not in the world of publishing and people author books. So it's a good tidbit to know that if it's based on numbers, is it based on just what somebody feels, right?
Yeah. I mean, if anyone tells you they can promise that you'll hit the New York Times bestseller list with their program, then just run away. Just don't even give them a thing. Yeah. There are marketing programs out there that do a really good job of hitting the USA Today list. And they used to do a really good job of hitting the Wall Street Journal list when it was on. There's some scams out there. There's some good ones. There's some good marketers, though, that do regularly hit those lists. And it's marketing campaigns. So you probably also heard, like, there's also a lot of rigging, like where, billionaire buys, a bunch of books and makes it look like it's a bunch of people when it's just that one person. And, that does happen. But there are marketing campaigns that are really based on sales of the book itself that can effectively target those lists. And those are good lists because if a USA Today bestseller, that's considered a national bestseller. So you can market that for yourself forever. I mean, you'll forever be a national best-selling author, right? Like until the day you die, like every speaking gig or any event that you're at, you can say, national best-selling author, your name. So that's why a lot of our clients, they do put a lot of resources into getting pre-orders and selling as many books as they can that first week, because that's really their best opportunity to hit those lists. And if they do, then even if their sales fall off later, they still will always have that moniker for them, which can be a really great marketing tool, of course, for a lot of authors who, where their book relates to their professional endeavors.
Yeah. How have you seen the landscape change over the past, 17 plus years that you've been in the business of books? We talked a little bit about how AI now, they can be an author. There are all these other, like you said, there are all these different systems that say, we'll make you an instant bestseller, monetize by creating a book.
There's been a lot of changes. I mean, one of the things that's been a welcome change has been the rise of the hybrid publisher, but good hybrid publishers. There used to only be like one good hybrid publisher, which was, Greenleaf. It was a really good one. They were one of the early ones that was just really focused on doing great work. Whereas a lot of the other hybrids were just, they were just awful, like bad mistakes in the books. The book covers would look terrible. Like you could tell that it was, someone's nephew said they could do a design and, so they just hired them. It's just like really bad. The quality of the paper, everything was bad. And they didn't have any distribution. They couldn't sell into bookstores. They couldn't sell. It was just all what you call vanity press, where you would just get your print on demand copies and then, it might be available on Amazon. And early on, they were figuring that out because that wasn't hard to do. But, 15 years ago, that was really all they had for options. But now there's like really, really solid hybrid publishers that, where authors can retain the rights to the book. They can kind of do whatever they want with the book to a certain degree, but they just have a lot of flexibility and control over the content. And it's a really high quality. And a lot of these hybrids sell, some of them sell and distribute through Simon & Schuster. Some of them sell and distribute through Penguin Random House. So it's such a higher caliber. It comes with the cost as well, but it's just such a higher caliber product. But it's nice for a lot of these authors whose businesses or their profiles would really benefit from having a book, but they don't want to have some Mickey Mouse book that looks like, that has low quality paper, and it's something that they're embarrassed of. These hybrids really put out a quality product. So that's been a very welcome development, and they've been taking on a ton of business, just because also the other trend has been traditional publishing is just constricted so much. It used to be a bunch of different big publishers, then it was the big six, then it was the big five. They've been trying to make it the big four with different publishers trying to buy out the others. And all this consolidation, there've been massive layoffs. The industry has been shrinking in general, and which has been kind of good for us in some ways, because we've been kind of on the rise, and this has been on decline, and we've been able to bring in a lot of great talented editors from the traditional, like all of our editors are from like Penguin and Harper and other traditional publishers. But anyway, that's in terms of the market. What's happened is traditional publishers are becoming much more risk averse as well. So that's why you see a lot of these like celebrity books and stuff, and they're really looking for the sure bets. Like they don't want to take as many risks. So it's a lot harder for those authors. They don't take a chance on as many authors. So especially in fiction and just kind of concept books, it's just really hard for them to, if it doesn't have a clear P&L for them, it's really difficult to convince a publisher to kind of bet on an author. So of course, that's totally juiced the hybrid industry, which is now giving authors a really great opportunity to get a book out there and give it a chance. Of course, the author is paying for that chance, but at least it's there. Whereas before, it just wasn't. And, a lot of our business authors, they go right to hybrid publishing from the get-go anyway, because for them, they don't want to wait the 1.5 to 2 years that it takes a traditional publisher to publish a book. They want it out quicker. They want a faster speed to market. They want to have the wheel in their hands. They don't want to have to pitch it around and play a dating game with all these publishers and try to get a deal. They just say, look, I've got a marketing budget. Our company can afford this. So this makes sense in terms of our budget for promotion of this company. And this is the best way we can think to promote the company. And so they're able to just kind of make it all work. And it makes sense for them to just go through a hybrid publisher and get it done.
Nice. I wanted to flag that on your website, you have your services, you describe what they are, and then you even have your pricing. I love that level of transparency that you offer for somebody who is interested in knowing what does it really cost from a very high caliber expert in this field. If I want to write a book, or I have an idea for a book, I want a ghostwriter, I see you have book proposals, beta readers, blueprint days. You have a lot of different service offerings under your umbrella.
Yeah, it feels like a lot, but it's just basically it's all related to how do we build a book and make it better? That's really what it relates to. And, some people, they would rather have a book coach and they would write it, but they want a book coach that really understands how to write a book to kind of go alongside them. So that's one service. Some people want to pitch traditional publishing and they don't want anything else, and they don't want to even write the book until they know they got a deal. So that's why, we'll write a book proposal and pitch it. Some authors need ghostwriting, but nuts to bolts. And so there's a lot of different services, but it really is all the same thing, building great books and achieving the publishing goal of the author. But the price ranges, of course, they do vary greatly. As you can imagine, it takes a lot more work. If you've got a book that's well written, it needs a couple little tune-ups. It's like a car that needs a paint job. That doesn't take a whole lot of time, which means it doesn't cost all that much. For us to have one of our executive level editors review and give feedback on a book and kind of do a diagnosis, you're probably looking at a couple $1,000s for that service. And that's to get somebody that, has acquired and launched, multiple New York Times #1 bestsellers with big publishers. On the other end, if you're looking to write a book from scratch, the cheapest version we have is $50,000 for that, for a full-length book. But it gets into the hundreds pretty quickly, depending on what other things you want. If you want to have a New York Times #1 bestselling author as your ghostwriter, if you want to have editors on the book that have, whose previous job was acquiring books at a high level for Penguin Random House, that comes with an added cost. We also have agents on our team, people who used to work as literary agents, and they can be a part of the process to help pitch and figure out the position of the book and how to really get the biggest deal. So these kind of elements, we do beta testing. That's one of the services that we do externally, where we'll have random, well, they're not completely random, they're targeted, but they're lay people. They're people that come to the book not from a professional editing standpoint, they're readers. And we can run testing to see, it's kind of like screen testing, what they do in film, but we do it with a book. So if you're getting all these different services all wrapped up, then that's where you're getting much bigger packages. And I think, we've sold packages with certain key kind of celebrity caliber ghostwriters, close to $500,000 for the whole package included. But typically, most of the authors that we work with are usually in the 100 to 150 range when it comes to ghostwriting. But we get a lot of clients that they've already got the book written, or they just want us to help them with a concept. And in that case, you're only looking at a couple $1,000s to get, a former Random House editor looking over the book and giving some really specific feedback. And it's all very personalized too. They'll hop on the call with you or get in a room with you. We do a lot of in-house stuff in person, just whatever is needed to really get you over the finish line.
Nice. Yeah. Well, is there anything that you want to dispel about the world of publishing that we haven't covered? I know we've covered a lot. I think this is probably the most valuable conversation I've had about the world of publishing, how it really works, and what people really need to know. Because I think a lot of times, even I'm a marketer, but we hear all these marketing messages about how easy things are. And
right. Yeah, I would say just always be wary of the source of your information, and this is something we run into all the time because we work with hybrids and traditional publishers, and, we're kind of insider outsiders. We didn't come from publishing. We had to learn all the stuff on our own, and all the connections and relationships we built. I mean, we built those over time organically. And, I won't say any specific rhetoric here, but just, you're going to get a very different answer about what the best publishing path from one person over another, depending on what their stake in it is. Mm-hmm. And, you get a lot of naysayers, you'll get a lot of misinformation, it's impossible to get a publishing deal unless you have a platform. Like, you'll get a lot of different things that just aren't necessarily true. It's a complicated industry. There's a lot of different options. And to complicate things worse, there's a lot of bad actors that are trying to, sell bags of sand that are advertised as bags of gold. And, just always be wary of like the source. And of course, we're happy to offer free consultation to anybody that calls us to just help figure out, okay, what's actually, because we're agnostic in terms of the direction and we just really look for the goal, the author's goal, we can help just at least get them in the right direction. Whether or not they use us or not for services, that doesn't matter. We're happy always to just kind of direct people the right way and make sure, because it's important for us to protect this industry and, just happy to guide people in the right direction. But no, we cover some good things. The bestseller list is always fun to talk about and the different paths of publishing. I think the one thing, regardless of who you are and what genre you're in, there is a way to get your book out there, assuming you have the resources. There is a way to make sure that you get your book out there, published, and give it a chance. And if you're in the nonfiction space, you can do a lot more than just that. But yeah, I would say that pretty much covers it.
Kevin, I want to make sure people know they can go to ka-writing.com to learn more about your services. Is there anywhere else you want them to go? Do you want them to connect with you on LinkedIn? Do you have social media?
Yeah, LinkedIn's always great. Feel free to connect with me personally there. And like I said, we're always happy to talk. Just give us a call. We're not if you call, a robot isn't going to answer. You're not going to get a chat bot on the website. We're real people and happy to jump on a call and just kind of talk through wherever you're at. And, I would say the one thing is just, it's never too early to have that conversation. It's so much better to have those conversations early than too late, where you've written a book in the total wrong direction than you should have. Or, a lot of times we get those people that say, well, I'm almost ready. I just want to focus on writing this for another 3 months and then I'll come back. And then they do that and we see it and we're like, oh, geez, if we would have just had a 45-minute conversation with you, we could have saved you all of wasting your time writing this 3 chapters this direction when it really should have been a completely different direction. So yeah, it's never too early to have a conversation to make sure that you're on the right path.
Nice. Well, I really appreciate that. And I always ask people what their favorite quote or mantra is, but I really want to ask you what your favorite book is.
Oh gosh, my favorite book is like your favorite children, right? If you had 1,000 children.
Yeah.
Oh, my favorite book. Well, I don't know if I could pinpoint a specific book. I really like Nabokov and I like Cormac McCarthy a lot. Those ones are really heady. One of the ones that, I like books that challenge me, that I have to reread. I'm not a really fast reader, so I like books that I kind of have to absorb and really reflect on. If I'm going to read a book, it's something I want, it's usually, if it's not like a really quick business book, I like Dan Pink. I like those books as well. But yeah, if it's a book I really want to absorb in, it's going to be a slow reader. I'll leave you with this. I don't think too many people have read all of Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time. So that was one endeavor that I took that was really, really rewarding. And so that one was one that still sticks with me. I still think about it. And there's moments of that book that still are with me today, even though it's been like 10 years since I read it. So
Fantastic. And do you have a favorite quote mantra that you want to give us as well?
Well, on my business card, I actually have a Marcel Proust quote.
Wow.
I can't see it. There you go. It says, if a little dreaming is dangerous, the cure for it is not to dream less, but to dream more. So, there's my quote right off the business card.
Amazing. This has been such a really fun conversation. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate your time today.
Pleasure.
I know you've given lots of great advice to all of my listeners and watchers. And thanks to you for watching or listening to this episode. I'll be back again with another amazing expert to make your life and your business a little bit better every day. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.